Today is a feast day, not an ordinary Sunday in ordinary time. Every, 6, 7, 8 years, this feast replaces the ordinary Sunday. So it takes a little commentary. It's the dedication of the Lateran Basilica. The main basilica, the papal church, if you will. You'd think of St. Peter's Basilica. It's actually St. John's Lateran. So we have to have a little history. We're going to have a history class today and a Bible one-on-one class today. But it's going to be a homily, I hope. The history is that the Laterini family, and you can read this in Google or whatever, Lateran family had this big mansion and land in the city of Rome, and it was honored by, and they paid service to the Roman domination. But in the 300s, when Constantine conquered Rome, he gave that to the church, to the structure of the church. And it was a palace, and it's been used for this and for that for centuries. But in the 12th century now, that's when it was dedicated, and it's a festival now because it's saying the honor of the world is now centered in the service of the church. And you read in the first reading, if you hear it or read it in Ezekiel, the rivers flowing from the temple, the water flowing from the temple, are for the fruitfulness, for the benefit of those who will profit from the water, growing things, which is a great symbol of the church. And so the history is that the 12th century and ever since then, that which was Roman honored and secularly honored has become the church. The Lateran big castle, I guess you'd call it, is now a museum and has been offices and all these things. And those of you who have been to Rome, you've probably been there and seen the glory of that palace and the beauty of the church. So that's why it's a festival today. Now, Bible 101. Why is this gospel in the 2nd chapter of John, very important, John's gospel, the cleansing of the temple is in chapter 2. Very early in the synoptics, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the cleansing of the temple is kind of the final, that's enough. The Pharisees and the Roman officials saying, he's cleansing our temple, driving out the sellers of those things which are according to the law must be there for people to buy and to sacrifice. That was temple service. And Jesus says, and we read it in the gospel, I am the new temple. So we have to talk about that. But why is it in chapter 2? There's 2 stories in chapter 2 of John's gospel. And I am claiming that that is part of the prologue. You know, the prologue is that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. That whole 19 verses, and then other little events, recognizing that Jesus is the Messiah. But that's prologue. That's what's going to happen in the rest of the play. And in chapter 2, the very first story in chapter 2 is the changing of water into wine. Why is that in the same chapter as changing the temple into a church? That's what we're going to say. Okay, changing water into wine, I'm saying, is a prologue. This is what I'm going to do the rest of the gospel. Remember, John's gospel is written a long time, 70 years, people don't know, but a long, long time after the synoptics, after the resurrection. There's a lot of development. So John's gospel is very different from the synoptics. It's much less, if you want to say, a biography, and much more a development of the church. Okay, so there's the changing of the water into wine. There's the changing of what is the temple about? We're going to come back to that. But in chapter 3, he changes Nicodemus. Chapter 4, he changes the sinful woman into a loved woman. Chapter 5, a crippled man becomes healed. Chapter 6, the changing of bread into the body of Christ, if you want to say. That's what he's saying. Chapter 8, he changes prostitute into a beloved daughter. Chapter 9 changes a blind man into a man who was blind and now can see. Chapter 11, it's changing a dead man into a living man, calling him out of the tomb. So that's the development. But that's what gets symbolized in our gospel today. You have, obviously, it's a perfect example of living the law, doing the right thing, buying according to your financial abilities. So then you sacrifice, and then you are okay in God's eyes because you sacrificed something. You bought it. Now, in the last 3 or 4 weeks, we've talked a lot about religion or spirituality as kind of an economic system. If you do the right thing, you get the right things. If you do all these things, you get all these things. It's a business, a quid and a quo. A what for a what. And that's what's being changed. That's what Jesus is saying. Now, I am the temple. I am what you think you do. I do for you. You don't do it for God. God does it for you. And it's not a business, it's a relationship. And 2 weeks ago, we had the Pharisee telling himself all the great things he did and the sinner in the back. Remember that. We've had all kinds of gospels about Jesus saying there's something new going on. And what's new is that God is the one who changes you. It's I will be myself, God says, by doing for you what you think you have to do for yourself. Which is what the Pharisee did 2 weeks ago. I did all these things, so I'm okay. It's not a business. It's a relationship. And in a relationship, in the mystery of any relationship, you're really not economically, physically sure. There's always relationship. The more intimate a relationship is, the more mysterious it is. And you're never going to know how you're doing with spouse or friends or family. There's always a little mystery, a little uncertainty, a little faithfulness within the relationship. It's not a business. There is business. You get this for this. Sure. But that's not a relationship. That's business. We've talked about this before. But it's so important that if we're going to have a spirituality based on Jesus, our holiness is not what we do. We do because of the holiness he shares with us. He gives to us. We don't earn it. We receive it. As we don't achieve it, we receive it. And having received it, of course, what are we going to do with it? We will distribute it. Not as a business deal. What I do is not to please God and render God helplessly benevolent toward me. And I'm safe. No, I'm not safe. I'm faithful. I trust the holiness that is already there, the goodness that is already there, the changing of my water into wine, the changing of my blindness into sight, the changing of my sinfulness into the relationship of being loved. The change is the work of God. The work of God is creation and ongoing creation. Change is creation. So he changes water and creates wine. And he does that the whole rest of the gospel. But we celebrate that the church is not a place of honor. You can visit it, but a church is a church when it is in service of God's creative love in the lives of others. Let me say that again. The church, we in the church, are really church when we are in service of others whom God is creating, continuing creation through me in their lives. Spouses, children, friends, neighbors, enemies. We are always not in the business of salvation, but in the relationship of creative love. We receive it in the Eucharist. We distribute it, being the water that gives life, as it says in Ezekiel. We are giving life. It's our dignity. It's our mission.